Hello and welcome to today's lecture. I'm going to be speaking a bit more about the Jewish concept of the structure of the different worlds, the universes. Basically, I'm not going to get into the details, especially not on the Kabbalistic level, which is could take years to fully understand, if ever. But we're just going to get a broad overview. We touched on it on the previous lecture. We spoke about the hierarchy. You've got God at the top, and then you've got basically you've got the place where he reveals to us, well, even though we don't exist yet, that there's going to be a place for us to exist in, a space, so to speak. Whereas on as we explained in the second Keystone lecture, God, on his level, nothing's happened. Everything's happening on our level. God's doing something, we don't know how, but for our perception, we perceive that there's a process going on, right? Obviously, God's above time and above change, so the process can't be going on in God himself. So it's all for our benefit, and we don't know what that means, just like we don't understand God. So we don't understand how God manages to cause something, where when we cause something, the only way we have of understanding cause and effect is by looking at our world, but we're stuck in our world which functions on cause and effect. So therefore, naturally, and also we explained there, we use concepts to understand something, and since God's above concepts and above cause and effect, so therefore by definition you can't really understand how he does anything. So therefore we only focus on what we receive, what we perceive is coming from him, i.e. his creative force or different interactions with the world. So he creates this sort of space for things to exist. Then within that he creates his certain lenses through which he channels his communication to us, his attributes, kindness, justice, mercy, even on one level his thoughts, even there are creation. As we explained, God's knowledge is not like our knowledge. When we spoke about the paradox of foreknowledge and free will, we explained that God's knowledge isn't our type of knowledge at all. Our knowledge is something separate from us. It's tied into our personality, our existence, but if we'd lose our knowledge, we would still be us. With God, you don't say that. There's no parts to God, so therefore we can't really understand his knowledge. So when God creates something, it's really his knowledge of which is doing a creative force as well. And and that's how he knows everything, like we explained last time. Right, so and even on one level, I think we mentioned this in one of the earlier Keystone lectures as well, he even creates his will as well, which doesn't make sense to us at all, because we only do things because we want to do them. The first domino in us doing anything is I want something, and therefore that causes a chain effect. Then we start thinking how we're going to achieve it, then we put things into practice, we actually do the actions of carrying out our plans, and we end up achieving our goal. But with God, but it all starts with rotzon, with desire or intention or focus on purpose. With God, you can't say that. So the way we understand it is that God actually creates this thing called his will. And remember, we are a reflection of all those different elements of structure and process which he uses to create the world. So therefore we have a desire, we have thoughts, we have actions. Just like the way that God appears to us. Remember, this is all on the outside of the equation, like we explained in the second lecture. You've got God's side of things where it's very simple, it's just God, there's nothing else, no change, no time, no concept. And on our side of things, we perceive God doing something, creating a world, right? And part of us understanding God's doing is God's thought processes, which is also a revelation to us. So we understand God as having a purpose that is the rotzon, the desire to do good, and then he works out the best way to do it, which results in a world, as we explained in the very first lecture, where there's a place for us to be infinite givers like him. Okay, so that's let's say the third stage for our purposes. So you've got God on his dimension, the source. Then somehow there's a sort of like a synapse, a big, like a qualitative jump from that stage to this dimension where of us, where we're going to exist in this dimension. And the first stage within our dimension is God's created a place for us to exist. Once he's done that, he starts as the hierarchy of all the worlds, of all the spiritual to physical universes. He creates his attributes and his lenses, or his ways of revealing himself, which in the end is going to be the blueprint of everything in the universe. Everything's going to copy and mirror this structure of God's different attributes, and especially mankind does it much more closely than anything else. Then the next stage is a universe where the souls are created from, the human soul, which is just below God, so to speak, or our perception of God. Right? Our perception of God is based on those revelations he gives to us, like we mentioned in the previous stage. Then you've got the angels and basically different channels of energy which bring down the spiritual forces and start limiting it until you get finally to the physical world which we're in now. It's called the Olam HaAsiyah, the world of action. We're actually, technically speaking, there's many levels within it. We're just on the very, very bottom part of it, right? And then there is, if you go a bit further, you've got the worlds of evil. So if you think of evils going, it's sort of like you've got like God at the top, the ultimate good, and then you've got the souls, the angels, physical world, which is more or less bad. But then you've got below that, you've got sort of a mirror image of everything where you've got the forces of evil are drawing things down away from God. That's the whole structure, and our job is to bring God into the physical world, and the evil's just revealed as a tool, as a bridge to get to that ultimate good, because that's what gives us free will, and we reveal the evil was always for God's ultimate purpose, which was to do good, like we explained in the third lecture. Okay, so let's focus on what are these spiritual forces? How do we understand them? These things which should create the world, which God uses to create the world. Okay, so we know that it says in the verse in Genesis and Bereshis, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim ve'aretz. In the beginning, we might have a lecture on that verse. Someone's asked for that, but we're not going to focus on that now. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was empty, and etc., etc. And the third verse says, "Vayomer Elokim yehi or, vayehi or." And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So this is how the structure of the universe is. You've got God saying something, and then you've got something happening. Okay? So that is to say that the words of the Torah, the words of Hebrew, Loshon Hakodesh, the holy language, literally translated, is the language God used to create the world. So how does that work? So the idea is like this. Imagine you've got a word describing a hand, yad. Yud Dalet, 2 letters, yad. Okay. So in Hebrew, we've got this word. The reality of my hand is actually a spiritual energy. It's just once it's gone through the world of the souls, the world of the angels, and got to the world of the physicality, what's happening is God's taking that very, very abstract spiritual light and he's limiting it, he's compressing it until it becomes more physical, until it actually ends up as being a hand in this world. So what's really going on is that the Hebrew word is the source of the physical object. That's why it's called Loshon Hakodesh, the holy language, because this is the language where God literally creates a world with. Right, like we said, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, let there be light, Or, Aleph Vav Reish. It's a shame I have to work out how to get the Hebrew letters on the screen. I haven't worked out how to do that yet. Or, Aleph Vav Reish, let there be light, Vayehi Or, and there was the physical light. Actually, the light of the first day is not obviously physical light, it's actually spiritual light. It's the light of the world to come. Okay. But the light of the physical light is really the light of the 4th day. There's many explanations exactly how the 6 days work, exactly what's going on. Right. So this is a very fundamental difference between Hebrew and all other languages. That is to say, in other languages, you have objects. You have a table, you have a chair, you have a hand. There's no reason why, it's all arbitrary. There's no reason why you can't say about a table, I don't want to call it a table anymore. Let's all make an agreement. For now, we're going to call the table a chair, and we'll call a chair a table, right? So you tell someone, oh, can you please tuck the table under the chair? You'll understand what he means. Because they're just labels, they're just functional. Words and names are just useful, but the main focus of most languages is we've got to get on with the physical world. You're going to see, hopefully in the next lecture, we're going to speak about this a bit more, about what do people perceive as more real. Yeah. Anyway, that's a hint to what they call a taster for the next lecture. What's more real? Yeah, physical or spiritual, right? So they look at the physical world as, fait accompli, and we've got to be able to function. So what do? Is we use words and language in order to put labels on things in order to be able to function in society, to communicate, right? Very deep idea about the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel people were using this concept against God, right? They were all speaking the same language, right? They wanted to make a city with a tower which corresponds to a body with a neck. The neck is the place of speech, right? So they're trying to take the physical world with the speech aspect of it, but the mind aspect, remember, the mind is meant to express through speech and bring into action, but they didn't want God to be at the top of the tower. They wanted to make v'naseh lonu shem, it says, and let's make for ourselves a name, a Hashem. We call God, Jewish people generally refer to God, different words colloquially. Well, the most common one is Hashem, the name, because we can't describe God at all. So we just call him the name, the name which is our perception of what God is, but there isn't a real word for him. So the name, whatever that revelation is, what's the idea? Because the name is the essence of something. So the deepest aspect we know about God is his name. Right? So the people in the Tower of Babel, they said, let's make for us a name. So you can imagine they're making their edifice. They're all unified with one language. They make a city representing the physical element of the world. And of course, you've got to have a spiritual guide to the world. You've got to have an ideology. So the tower is meant to be the thing which links us to that ideology, the bridge, so to speak, when the human would be the neck. And then on top of that, you should have God telling you what to do. Yeah, God's the spiritual source of everything. Then it's transmitted down to us. Then you've got the physical world. But they wanted to make a city with a neck. But Naseh Lonu Shem, let's make our own Hashem, our own name, our own spiritual source. So they created something which we call an ideology. Right? It's very, very similar to modern day communism. Communism is the idea that everyone's united, but individuals aren't important. The important thing is the ideology, which is the top of everything. In fact, we see many parallels to communism or socialism, this type of political system. We see in different Talmudic sources. One says that it describes what happened when they were building the Tower of Babel, is that people would, before their languages were mixed up, someone would, let's say, fall off the tower. People think, no, okay, what can you do? Let's keep going, yeah? If someone dropped one of the bricks and it fell all the way down to the bottom and it broke, people were crying, they were rending their clothes. I can't remember exactly what it says, but they were absolutely distraught. What's the idea there? It's the idea that people, individuals, are not important in this ideology. Yeah? Here, the ideology itself is the only important thing. I suppose you could say, like the idea of in Soviet Russia, is a Mother Russia. That was the main thing. Yeah, everything's for the motherland, right? Yeah, that's our source. That's our parent, not God. That's why communism always goes along with atheism. It always aims to destroy religion. The idea of religion is that there's a higher power which is directing you, telling you that you've got a purpose here. But communism wants to say, no, there's no purpose except the purpose we want to give to everyone. So they cut out God out of the picture. The question is, which one comes first? Is atheism result in communism? Communism results in atheism? Yeah, you can think about that yourself. Anyway, so that's what was going on in the Tower of Babel. So it's interesting, they were all speaking Loshon Hakodesh, they were all speaking the holy tongue in that place. And God says, I better do something about this, because if I don't stop them, they're going to be successful, which is an incredible idea. It seems that they would have, if God would have let them carry on, they would have actually succeeded in excluding God from the world, which naturally would have ended up with the destruction of the world, because then if they cut out God completely from the world, then God's energy is not coming in, it would just disappear. So he had to mix up the languages, right? And it's very interesting, just as I'm talking now, it seems that there's a very nice element of justice here, because we know that God always works, we say in midah keneged midah. That's how the Jewish idea of midah keneged midah, that God does things measure for measure. You must already be familiar with this idea, especially after the first lecture. Yeah, everything has to be just. Everything has to be worked out with a precise calculation. Yeah, if God wants us to be 100% givers, because He wants to give 100% of the infinite pleasure to us, so we have to be exactly the same. That's the idea of measure for measure. So just like they wanted to remove God, who is the source of the spiritual language which creates the world, and they wanted to make the world into sort of like a naturalistic way of looking at the world, where things work naturally and we don't have to worry about the supernatural at all. So God said, oh, but you're using that language which I'm using to create the world, so you don't get it anymore. I'll give you 70 languages, I'll give you different languages, where your languages are now just going to be in order to function with each other. You won't have that powerful creative language, which is Loshon Hakodesh. Right. Right, so this is the difference between Loshon HaKodesh, the holy language, Hebrew. I'm not talking about modern Hebrew. Modern Hebrew is based on the real Hebrew, with a few bits and pieces mixed up. So you have to be a bit careful if you're fluent in modern Hebrew. Some of the concepts can be different from the real Hebrew. But the real Hebrew is basically the biblical Hebrew, the one which you see in the Torah. So on one hand you have Loshon HaKodesh, where the words themselves are creating the object, and you have other languages where the object is the main thing and the names are just labels in order to function. So it goes much deeper than that as well. If you look at the object now, and you'd be able to have, let's say, instead of X-ray vision, you've got spiritual ray vision, if you like. And you'd be able to see it penetrate through the physical object and look into the energy side of it, or the spiritual energy side. You'd actually be able to see the letters of the Aleph base, the Hebrew alphabet, in the different permutations which relate to the object you're looking at. So if you'd look at a hand, like we say, if I'd have the right sort of vision, I'd be able to look at my hand and see the letters Yud Dalet, right? You can kind of see a Yud and Dalet. There's a Yud, maybe a Dalet there. All right, never mind. Okay, just thinking. Yeah, sometimes you actually do see the thing in the physical form as well. So it's very interesting that. Yeah, a Yud is basically a tiny, sort of like a tiny little dot, sort of that shape, and a Dalet is sort of this shape, right? Right. Right, so it's very interesting because we know that Adam it says in chapter 2 in Genesis, it speaks about Adam naming the animals, and it says in the verse that everything which Adam called, that's what its name was. The question is, okay, it seems to be saying something very significant there when we speak about eating. The deeper idea of the holiness of eating, that we might speak about this. It's connected with what Adam was doing here. What was Adam doing? Surely if we were there, we could call anything. I'll call this a horse, I'll call that a cow. I'll make up any word. I'll call this thing, instead of a horse, I'll call it a book, or a blah blah, or whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah? If we're just looking for labels, then anyone could do that. So what was Adam actually doing there? So of course you understand that Adam was doing something much deeper here. Right? We're not going to go into exactly what he was doing here, but we're going to touch on what he was doing. When we speak about eating, and hopefully we'll go much deeper into exactly what he was trying to do. So Adam was calling the names of the animals. What he was really doing is he was looking, just like I described, me trying to look at my hand, he looked in every animal and he could see the spiritual roots of that animal. And he could see, for example, he looked at a lion, right? This is the example given. He saw the word Aryeh, Aleph, Resh, Yud, and a Hey. Right? So Aryeh is the Hebrew word for lion. Yeah. So he looked at a lion, he examined it, and he looked spiritually through spiritual sort of X-ray vision, or he just looked at the nature of the lion and was able to deduce what the essence of a lion is. And he said, look, what are the two, this is for our purposes, I'm sure Adam had much deeper ideas than this, but what are the two things which we know about lions? What are characteristics about lions? It's got a lot of energy, it's got a lot of movement. Yeah, when it's on the hunt, it runs and it attacks. And also, we know the lion's quite a special animal. We call it the king of the animals, right? And we know the lion is the king of, they're different, so to speak, kings of different categories of living beings. You've got the birds, you've got domesticated animals, you've got living animals, then you've got the world as a whole. You've got the king of the wild animals is the lion, right? So he said, well, if it's the king of the animals, that means it's similar to God. So it must have God's name in it. So the letters Aleph, Yud, and Hey are three letters of one of God's primary names, Ekia. And because it's got movement and energy and desire and, emotional energy, I guess you'd call it. I'm not sure if that's the best way to describe it. But that letter is represented by the letter Resh. Resh is the letter which starts the word Rotz, which means to run, or Ruach, which means wind, which is all about movement, about emotions. Right? There's a spiritual soul which gives us emotions, is called the Ruach. Starts with the letter Resh as well. Rotzon, desire, starts with the letter Resh. Right? So putting those letters together, the Aleph, Yud, and the Hey, with the Resh in the middle, you've got Aryeh. And that's how he said. So this animal is called Aryeh. Not because I'm deciding it's called Aryeh, I can see the spiritual roots, these letters which are generating the existence of this animal, are the Aleph, a Resh, a Yud, and a Hey, Aryeh, the lion. That's how Adam named the animals. He wasn't just randomly calling them names, he was giving things intrinsic to him. Someone told me something very interesting. It's quite a nice idea, I'm not sure if they're right, but the word sus, the word for horse, the idea of a horse, what's the essence of a horse? A horse is a mode of travel, especially in the times before cars and before mechanized forms of travel. The main source of traveling was a horse. And the word for horse is sus, which is a samach, a vov, and a samach. A samach is actually essentially a circle, right? A vov is essentially a straight line or a hook, right? And then you've got another samach. So if you imagine you've got two circles, plus you've got your hook, it looks like you've got like some sort of wagon, or it's the idea of the horse's feet in the galloping. They make a sort of a circular thing. All right. Yeah, you can take that. Either you like it or you don't like it. But I think it's nice. Okay. So you see the idea of sus, a horse, the idea of the wheels or the moving there. Okay. So now let's just finish off now. So it's very interesting. In all other languages, the words for word and the word for thing are two different things. In English, it's word and thing. They're nothing like each other. There's no connection. Like in German, it's a Wort and Zach. In Yiddish, anyway. Wort is a word and Zach is a thing. Right? I can't go through all different languages. It'll take me a while to remember all the different languages, what the words for word and thing are. But you get the idea. I'm sure I've got an international audience, so look in your own language, see what the word for word and word for thing is, and you'll see they're different, most likely. However, in Loshon Hakodesh, the word for word and thing are exactly the same word. It's davar. Like davarim. It's davarim, Eile HaDavarim, the first words of the book of Deuteronomy. Eile HaDavarim, these are the words. Yeah? But davarim can mean things as well. So in Hebrew, davar, word, and davar, thing are the same. Why? Because essentially there's an intrinsic connection between a word and a thing. You could almost think of it like in scientific terminology, you've got energy and matter, right? So one of the ideas of in quantum science is that you have light. You've got this concept called light. What is light? So there's a whole discussion of a couple of 100 years exactly what is light. Are light little packets of matter, tiny little sort of like balls, imagine them as like little balls or little packets of light shooting out Yeah, so when we see something, we've got these trillions of little packets hitting our eyes, letting us see the light. Or is it actually energy waves? Or is it like, something which is not physical at all? It doesn't have any mass. It's just they've got a frequency, wavelengths, right? Right. So we understand that as something we call energy. So what is it? Is it energy or is it matter? What is light? So Einstein came up with his idea, well, his formula. I think other people came up with the idea as well. But the famous E equals mc squared. Energy is equal to matter, or mass rather, mass times the square of the speed of light. That means a very small amount of matter, right, multiplied by c squared, the speed of light, which is massive, squared, which is enormous, equals a huge amount of energy. And so the idea is that actually energy and matter are interchangeable. They're just two forms of the same thing. So when we speak about light, on one hand it's energy and it's matter. In fact, it's not just light, everything is like that. Even atoms, electrons, any subatomic particles we speak about can be visualized as matter or as energy. Yeah, it's like even human beings, we're made up of loads of atoms and, electrons, neutrons, protons, all that. Technically, we've got a wavelength, just like energy does. Very strange. But because we're so massive, because of different formulas, our wavelength is very, very insignificant. So when we're walking along, we don't see ourselves vibrating or oscillating, and everything seems to be, fixed and not sort of like, imagine our finger would be like this, where the finger would be like a few places all at once and sort of oscillating. So we see the idea of, even in science, the idea of matter and energy are interchangeable. They're two different states of light. So same thing in Loshon Hakodesh. When we speak about the word, we speak about the spiritual source, the spiritual roots of the thing. God sort of says, right, I want to create someone's hand. So he takes the letter Yud, he takes the letter Daled, Yad. Then this spiritual davar word filters, it gets compressed into the physical world. This huge amount of spiritual energy just gets crushed until it becomes something physical and tangible. Then you get the hand. You've got the hand, which is the thing, the davar. So the davar word creates the davar thing. That's why in Hebrew the word davar and davar, the word for word, the word for thing are exactly the same word, because words and things are the same. It's just, are we talking about on the spiritual world? We're talking about in the physical. In the physical world, it takes a physical form. Spiritual world, it's still in the form of the letters of the Aleph base. Okay, so that is the idea of the structure of reality, spiritual and physical, right? And the idea of Loshon Hakodesh, the holy tongue. Right, so we understand now that basically the spiritual is a source of the physical, and the way it works on a more technical level is using the letters of the Hebrew alphabet in different combinations, which manifest themselves in physical object. Very similar to the way that you have energy manifesting itself in matter, or even when they speak about things like the Big Bang, yeah, which we understand as creation. You've got a massive amount of energy, right? And then it crystallizes into different planets and stars, etc. Okay, so that's the idea of, that's why it's so important to learn Hebrew. Yeah, it's actually quite an easy language to learn relative to the others. It's very logical. There's very few number of roots in it, and the structure of the language is very simple. Still takes a bit of work, but I'd recommend anyone who doesn't definitely learn how to read and understand Hebrew. Okay, because this is the language that God used to create the world, and when we speak the words of Torah, we essentially, in a way, bring God down through using that language. And even by learning Torah in English or other languages, it's got this power of bringing God into the world. So by saying it in the Hebrew, the original Hebrew, it's much more intense, because you're actually being more similar to God, because you're saying those words which God said when he created the world. Right? And then that's the idea of the Jewish, and let's just finish off here, just one more idea, just remembered. That's why the rabbis describe God creating the world, Histakel Boiraiso Bora Alma. Hashem looked at the Torah and he created the world. Right? So not just each individual Hebrew word is a source of the physical, but in fact the whole Torah is a spiritual blueprint for the whole universe. Okay? So the words from in the beginning, Bereshis, right until the end of Le'nei Kol Yisrael, the end of Deuteronomy, that is meant to be the Ramban Nachmanides, who lived in the 12th, 13th century, 1200s, I think. Yeah, he actually says the whole Torah, from beginning to end, the 5 books in Hebrew, is actually one name of God. It's a huge, massive, I can't remember how many letters it is, hundreds of thousands of letters, something like that, or tens of thousands. Yeah, it's one huge name of God, right? And when we speak about the name of God, that means the spiritual root of everything. So God takes the spiritual letters of the Torah, and everything in the world emanates from that somehow. And the whole world is basically a physical manifestation of the Torah. It's not that he looked in the Torah and, okay, right, so I'll create it like that. He actually used those letters themselves and transformed them into physical counterparts, the davar into the davar, to make the world. Yeah, a bit like a genetic code. Yeah, it comes out as a human body. Right? You've got all the letters, all the combinations there, and then once you go through the translation process, cells take the DNA, they translate it into instructions how to create the nose, eyes, everything. Yeah, so God takes the Torah, he uses his translator, whatever that is. I'm not sure what that would be in this analogy, right? And he translates it into the physical world as a whole. So on the bigger level, God looks at the whole Torah and creates the whole world, the whole universe, right? And on the more micro level, every single word is a spiritual source of its corresponding physical object. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope to have you in the next lecture, where hopefully we're going to be continuing this idea, but we're going more into a bit deeper. All right, thanks for watching. All the best.